It must be Friday because I'm wearing one of these shirts. I got a list of things here that caught my attention in the past week or so, give or take. I did a couple videos on the lemon law situation in Quebec, which is a province of Canada. And the headline, the title of one of the videos I did was, a new lemon law has been passed in Canada. And then in the video, I make it very, very clear that it happened in Quebec, which is a province of Canada. I had probably a couple dozen people go, Steve, for future reference, Quebec is not Canada. It is not Canada. You are wrong to say there was a new lemon law passed in Canada because it happened in Quebec, not Canada. Now, I almost broke out the whiteboard for this one to show you how Venn diagram works. If Quebec is in Canada and something happens in Quebec, it did in fact happen in Canada. More specifically, happened in Quebec. But Quebec is in Canada. Now, I've talked to my good friend JP about this because he, of course, is from that area and speaks the languages quite well. And I said, hey, did I get something wrong? And he goes, no. I said, well, he goes, it's possible. There are people in Quebec who'd like to think they're not in Canada. He goes, but no, I mean, it's obvious that that's pretty straightforward. But yeah, so it reminded me, though, of a video I did a while back where I told a story about a guy who had something to do with a Ford product that's called a Bronco Sport. And of course, Ford makes a thing called a Bronco. It's a vehicle. It's an automobile, a thing. And they brought the name back. And as many purists have noted, the Bronco Sport and the Bronco are very unusual in the sense that quite often when you put a word after a name of a car, like a Charger or a Charger RT, the RT simply indicates that it's a level up, but it's the same vehicle, base vehicle. But it turns out that the Bronco and the Bronco Sport are actually quite different from one another. However, they're both called Broncos. One's called a Bronco, one's called a Bronco Sport. And so in the story I did, I was talking about this guy and his Bronco, and a couple of times I think I said Bronco as opposed to just Bronco Sport, and leaving off the sport offended people. And I got dozens and dozens and dozens of complaints from people going, Steve, it's a Bronco Sport, it's not a Bronco. Well, notwithstanding the fact that the two are kind of different from one another, the naming, the nomenclature, one of my favorite words, nomenclature, the nomenclature still indicates that a Bronco Sport is a kind of Bronco. It is the Sport Bronco. And interestingly, back when that happened, that's about a year ago, I actually went onto Ford's website to double check this. And they had a page for the Bronco. And on the Bronco page, they showed two, the Bronco and the Bronco Sport. So Ford considered them to be related in some way, shape, or form. And so the idea that, well, it's not a Bronco, it's a Bronco Sport, indicates to me some people don't understand like how groups work and things within groups. So Quebec is not Canada itself. I understand that Quebec is a province and Canada is a whole bunch of stuff, including Quebec. But Quebec is in Canada. So if something happened in Quebec, it did in fact happen in Canada. Now, I also occasionally will spot something on an old video because when I go into my page as the creator of this channel, it shows comments on all my videos as to when the comments got posted, regardless of what video they're on. So occasionally I'll see a comment on a video that's like 2, 3, 4 years old. And I saw a comment, I forgot what the video was about, but it had to do with whether or not you should buy a salvage vehicle. And I've talked about this before, that it's a dangerous game to play to buy a salvage vehicle for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is your insurance company might not want to insure it, your lender might not want to lend you money on it, and it might do weird things like drive sideways down the road, okay? And so I had said that, this is something you need to be very, very cautious of. And a guy responded just yesterday and said, I can't believe this guy, referring to me, doesn't understand that salvage titles actually aren't that big of a deal. Because in most states, any vehicle that gets stolen gets retitled as salvage when it's recovered. He can't believe that I didn't know that that's the case in most states. despite the fact that I doubt it's the case anywhere, let alone in most states. And one of the things I've encountered a lot in my life, especially as an attorney, I've noticed this, is that people will say something as if it's true. And they'll go, all vehicles that get stolen when they're recovered are retitled as salvage. That's just how it is. And if you ask the person, where'd you get that from? Did you see a statute? Did you actually read those blue books and find a statute that says that? MCL 257, et cetera, et cetera. Where does it say that? They're going to say, oh, I was told that by a buddy of mine who knows. Did your buddy go to law school? Does he work for the DMV? No, he talked to a guy who, next thing you know, it's a game of telephone, and who knows who started it. But can you imagine? So I get in my car, drive to the store, I run inside, and I foolishly leave the keys in the car, and somebody runs over, jumps in the car, and takes off down the street with it. I call the police, please pull the guy over. I walk up, they arrest the guy, they write a report, and they go, here are your keys, here's your car. But sir, you need to get your car retitled as salvage now, because it's been stolen and been recovered. It's salvage. It's salvage. That's one of the most idiotic things I've ever heard, but the fact that I didn't know that makes me the idiot. So I can tell you, I've heard some of the craziest things. People tell me, they go, well, the law is such and such. And I go, in what state? And they go, every state, all 50 states. So it must be a federal law then, right? No, it's a state law. Okay, so each state has its own law just like this? Okay, can you show me one? And I had a discussion, I'm not going to get into it, with a relative of mine over whether or not something was true with the laws of Michigan. And I said, well, I'm a lawyer in Michigan. I've never heard of that before. He said, well, go ahead, look it up. I go, I can't look up a non-existent law. How do I do that? And he said, well, you're the attorney. You tell me. I'm like, no, you're the one who's telling me this stupid law that you think exists. It doesn't. But you're telling me it exists. Show it to me. Well, I can't do it. I'm not a lawyer. Well, you shouldn't be repeating stuff. And I asked him who told him. And as soon as he told me that, I go, oh, I know why they told you that. And I explained it to him. He's like, oh, do you think that's? Yes. A year later, he told me the exact same thing. So the other day I said, I'm going to make a prediction here. Here's what's going to happen. I forgot what video it was on. And I jokingly said, it reminds me of the prediction I made Saturday night while watching the football game with my friends, Michigan versus Michigan State. I predicted, and I can show this, by the way, that within the first few minutes of the game had started. I double-checked. It was within 5 minutes of the start of the game. I said final score 50-0. 50-0. And the final score is 49-0. And I said, as far as predictions go, that ain't bad. That ain't bad. I mean, I admit 50 is not 49, but it's close. It's darn close. And so I had predicted 50-0, final score 49-0. I thought that was pretty good. I got an angry email from somebody who apparently is a Michigan State fan who said, Steve, have you forgotten that Michigan lost to Appalachian State in 2007? Did you forget that? And he said in reference to your prediction. I'm not sure how a game that Michigan lost 16 years ago would play into my prediction, because my prediction, are you telling me if I'd remembered that, my prediction would have been exactly on? I would have guessed 49-0 if I'd factored in the Appalachian State performance 16 years ago? But what's funnier about that is that's clearly somebody who's a Michigan State fan who's upset that I was apparently, in their minds, making fun of Michigan State, which, by the way, I wasn't. I said I predicted the score. That's all I said. I didn't make fun of Michigan State. But if you want to talk about it, and you want to make fun of Michigan for losing a game to Appalachian State back in 2007, you have to remember that if you were to go look at the list of winningest college programs, that is schools who've won the most games, you can trust me on this, you can go look it up yourself. Guess who's number one on the list? And I have no idea where Michigan State is on the list because they ain't near the top. But Michigan is at the top. But if you want to start talking about Appalachian State 16 years ago, you probably then would be familiar with Michigan State losing to Central Michigan 3 times. Central Michigan, for those of you who are not in Michigan, is a school in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. It's a town up here that no one's ever heard of outside of the state of Michigan. CMU is a fine school, but they're not known as being a football powerhouse. And for a long time, MSU would have a warm-up game against them at the beginning of the year. And in 1991 and 1992, they lost to CMU 2 years in a row. Once in Lansing, and once in Mount Pleasant. And later on in 2009, they lost a third time. So if we want to make fun of Michigan losing to Appalachian State in 2007, well, at least we stopped playing them. As far as Michigan goes, I can't say I didn't attend Michigan, I'm just a fan. But Michigan State lost to CMU 3 times, including twice in a row in 91 and 92. And then they lost again in 2009, 2 years after that Appalachian State game that you thought I forgot about. No, I didn't forget about that game. U of M has had good years and bad years, and they just happen to have a good year right now, and last year, and the year before. How's State doing, by the way? And I'm only asking because you seem to think that I forget these things, so feel free to tell me how good State is doing right now. And that coach of theirs, Mel Tucker, how's he doing? Meanwhile, and I'm going to end on this one. By the way, I actually am related to more people who went to Michigan State than I am U of M. So I don't actually have anything against them. It's just funny that somebody thought they could get me by going, hey, Appalachian State. Yeah, I'll see your Appalachian State and raise you 3 CMUs. I did a video about the Supreme Court dealing with the language and discussing the meaning of or and in statutory construction contexts. And I had a guy log on and say, 5 minutes into the video, so far, no actual language on screen. So far, no actual language on screen. I'm checking out. That's what he wrote. I'm checking out because there's no actual language on the screen. Now, I've done thousands of videos for 9 years on this channel. And for putting actual language on the screen, I've done it once or twice, usually for comic effect. But I don't do it when I'm discussing a statute because to me it's just too confusing. And I hate putting the junk on the screen. And it's usually not that important. We're discussing and, or. You want to put the word and on the screen so you know what and means? Or, so you know I'm talking about O-R as opposed to O-R-E? Was that confusing you? So he said, I'm checking out. I'm checking out. So he's one of these drama queens who's I got to say goodbye to the world. I'm leaving this discussion. Hey, everybody on the internet, look at me. I'm exiting the room. Goodbye. And the funny thing is, I responded to him and said, is actual language on the screen required? Because he said no actual language on screen. I said, is actual language on screen required? And he came back, despite the fact that he was checking out, and said, I'm a professional. You could use graphs if you wanted to. Graphs. He may have meant graphics. I don't know. I'm a professional. I'm not sure what he's a professional of, unless he's a professional on-screen language requirer. But he says, I'm a professional. You could use graphs if you wanted to. And I responded to that, and I said, well, the video has been seen over 100,000 times, and you're the only person who's complained. And he responded to that, despite the fact he's checking out, and he said, well, good luck with your hand waving then, because it ain't going to work. It ain't going to work. And I responded to that by saying, just so you know, my channel's got over 250 million views now. Over 250 million views. Over 250 million views in the channel. So it appears to be working just fine. So what's bizarre about that, I just had a Peter Brady moment. What's bizarre about that, when it's time to change, it's time to rearrange, is that somebody will come along, and he's probably never seen another one of my videos. He has no idea who I am. He thinks that there's just some guy put up a video. And he saw the video, didn't see any of the numbers, any of the statistics, has no idea, didn't realize it's been viewed over 100,000 times, didn't realize that I've got 400,000 subscribers, none of that. It's all tabula rasa, okay? It's blank slate. It's all right from the beginning, okay? He sees my video, and he's waiting for something to pop up on screen that never happens, and he's horribly disappointed. So he types a thing about, I'm checking out. And when I respond to him, he knows it was me because he responded to me as if he recognized that I was the guy who was in the video. And he said the bit about, I'm a professional and I use language professionally. And you could have used graphics. You could. Yeah, I know that. But you'd think at some point where you're explaining to somebody else how to do their job, you should at least step back a little bit and take a quick reassessment of the situation. Because we've all heard stories like this, where somebody comes along and starts explaining something to you that you know so well, you're like, why are you explaining that to me? And so for somebody to tell me that I need to start putting graphics on screen and stop the hand waving, which apparently he thought I was doing, and that'll somehow help me, when he was apparently unaware, like I said, of 250 million downloads, 400,000 subscribers, and over 100,000 views on the video he was complaining about, shows to me that there's some issues there. But then again, he's checking out. And despite the fact he said he was checking out, he kept coming back to respond to me. So there you go. That's what I do with my time. Questions or comments, please put them below. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.